The cold wind blew through the small, decaying town where the Williams family once lived like royalty. Their large, two-story house stood on the hill, a proud symbol of wealth that had long since rotted from the inside out. It wasn't time or weather that had decayed the home, but something far darker: greed, pride, and betrayal. Many years ago, before the gates rusted shut, a girl named Lily had lived there. The youngest of 3 children, she had been the quiet one, the dreamer who loved to draw in the corners of her father's study and hum softly when no one was listening. But in that house, dreams were treated like foolishness, and kindness was mistaken for weakness. Her parents, Richard and Elaine Williams, were the type of people who measured love by status and worth. Richard had built his business from nothing, and he never let his children forget it. Elaine, ever the social climber, believed appearances were everything. Their eldest son, Adam, inherited his father's sharpness and arrogance. Their daughter, Grace, inherited her mother's vanity. But Lily inherited her grandmother's heart, soft, giving, and far too trusting for a family like theirs. When she was 12, everything changed. It began with Richard's company, a prestigious construction firm, suddenly falling into debt. His poor investments and mounting scandals had left them financially cornered. The tension in the house grew unbearable, with shouting matches that echoed through the halls at night. One evening, Lily overheard something that would alter her life forever. Her parents were arguing in the study, their words harsh and cruel. Lily's name came up again and again. She was an expense, Elaine said, another mouth to feed when they could barely keep their lifestyle afloat. Her private school tuition, her doctor visits, her endless needs, that brought them nothing in return. Richard said they had to make hard choices, and so they made one. Within weeks, they decided Lily would be sent to live with Elaine's distant cousin in another state, a woman she had never met, in a home she had never seen. They told her it was temporary. They told her it was for her own good. But deep down, Lily knew she was being discarded. The night before she left, she walked through the house one last time. Her siblings avoided her, pretending to be busy. Her mother barely looked at her. Only her father gave her a half-hearted pat on the shoulder and muttered something about being strong. She left the next morning with one suitcase and a stuffed bear. No one watched her go. The cousin she was sent to live with, Mrs. Parker, was kind at first but poor and struggling herself. Within a year, she grew tired of the responsibility. Lily was made to work, cleaning, cooking, doing chores far beyond her age. By 16, she was working odd jobs after school, saving every penny she could. When Mrs. Parker passed away unexpectedly, Lily was left completely alone. But she didn't break. She worked harder. She studied late into the nights, surviving on little more than willpower. She took scholarships, did part-time jobs, and refused to let the bitterness eat her alive. The pain of being unwanted became the fire that drove her forward. Every cruel word, every rejection, every night she went hungry, all of it became fuel. By the time she was 25, she had built something of her own. Starting as an assistant at a small real estate agency, she learned fast, faster than anyone expected. Her sharp instincts and relentless determination caught the attention of a private investor, who took her under his wing. Within 5 years, she had founded her own company, focusing on luxury developments and renovation projects. Her empire grew faster than anyone could have imagined. The newspapers began calling her the Queen of Urban Revival. The same construction industry that had once destroyed her father was now her playground. The name Williams became nothing more than a faint shadow behind her, a chapter she had erased. But fate, as it often does, has a cruel sense of irony. One morning, Lily received a call from her legal team about a new acquisition, an old estate being sold at a foreclosure auction. It was in her hometown, a large house that had been neglected and repossessed after years of unpaid loans. The Williams Mansion. She hadn't thought about that place in years, yet the name on the file made her heart stop. The house that had thrown her out was now rotting away worthless. The family that had rejected her had fallen from grace, completely. The more she read, the clearer the picture became. Her father's company had collapsed after multiple lawsuits. Her brother Adam had been caught embezzling funds, and her sister Grace had married into a failing business. Their wealth, their pride, their reputation, gone. They were drowning in debt, desperate to sell anything they had left. Lily sat in silence for a long time, the papers spread before her like ghosts of her past. She could have walked away. She could have ignored it all, content to let karma do its work. But something inside her, that part of her that remembered the little girl with the suitcase, whispered that this was her moment. Not just for revenge, but for justice. A week later, the Williams estate was quietly purchased through one of her holding companies. The paperwork didn't bear her name, only that of her firm. No one would suspect who was behind the deal. When the family received the offer, they accepted immediately. The house that had once been their symbol of status was now their last lifeline. As the ink dried, the property changed hands. The Williams family, broken and bitter, packed what remained of their possessions and prepared to leave the only home they'd ever known. And miles away, in a penthouse overlooking the city, Lily signed the final document and leaned back in her chair. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming rush of satisfaction and disbelief. The house, the very one that had witnessed her humiliation, now belonged to her. But she wasn't done yet. She wanted them to see her face. She wanted them to know exactly who had bought their misery. And she would make sure they remembered the daughter they threw away. The morning air was heavy with fog when Lily's car pulled into the outskirts of her old hometown. Years had passed since she last set foot there, yet everything looked strangely familiar. The narrow roads, the peeling paint on the shops, the same crooked sign outside the old diner. It was as if time itself had paused, holding its breath for her return. Her driver slowed as the black car approached the hill where the Williams estate stood. The mansion that had once gleamed with white pillars and manicured gardens was now a crumbling shell of its former glory. Paint peeled from the walls, the roof sagged in the middle, and weeds had swallowed the driveway. For years, that house had been her prison, the place where she learned that love could be conditional, that family could turn cold, and that being less meant being invisible. And now it was hers, every inch of it. When she stepped out of the car, the smell of damp earth and decaying wood filled the air. The wind carried faint echoes, ghosts of laughter and scoldings, footsteps and slammed doors. The memories hit her like a wave. She remembered standing in this very driveway as a child, clutching her small suitcase, waiting for a car that would take her away. But this time she wasn't leaving. She was coming back as the owner. Her assistant Carla joined her, holding a folder of documents. The property was officially under her name now, and a full renovation team was scheduled to arrive the next day. But Lily had one more plan, a personal one. Before she rebuilt the house, she wanted her family to see her, to know that the little girl they had cast aside had returned, not as a beggar, but as the one who now held all the power. Her opportunity came sooner than expected. That same afternoon, she received an email from a local real estate agent. The Williams family, Richard, Elaine, Adam, and Grace, had rented a small apartment downtown. They were in financial ruin, but word around town was that Elaine was still trying to host gatherings with old acquaintances, pretending everything was fine. The pretense was almost pitiful. Lily's mind began to work quickly. She arranged for a charity event, a heritage restoration fundraiser, under her company's name. The event would focus on restoring historic homes in the area. Invitations would be sent to all prominent families, including, of course, the Williamses. Her assistant didn't question it. She didn't know Lily's history here, didn't know the name Williams meant anything more than a random local family. To everyone else, this was just another business project. But to Lily, it was destiny coming full circle. When the night of the event arrived, the ballroom at the town's old hotel gleamed with chandeliers and gold-trimmed decor. Guests arrived in elegant attire, their laughter filling the air with the sound of wealth and status, the very things Lily's parents once worshipped. And then, through the crowd, she saw them. Her mother, Elaine, still dressed in pearls, but with deep lines around her mouth that even makeup couldn't hide. Her father, Richard, thinner now, pale, leaning heavily on a cane. Her brother Adam looked nervous, shifting his weight like a man who had lost his confidence. And Grace, still beautiful, but with eyes that carried exhaustion and bitterness. They didn't recognize Lily at first. How could they? The shy, unwanted child they had once thrown away was now a poised, commanding woman in a tailored black gown surrounded by success. Lily stood at the front of the ballroom as the host announced her name, Lily Carter, CEO of Carter Developments. The audience applauded politely, and when she began her speech, the Williams family froze. Their eyes widened, their bodies stiffened. It was as though a ghost had walked in from the past. As she spoke about rebuilding the community and restoring what was lost, her gaze fell directly on her parents. Richard looked away. Elaine's forced smile faltered. Grace whispered something to Adam, whose face had gone pale. By the time she finished her speech, the tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. When the event ended, the Williams family quietly left without approaching her. But that was fine. Lily hadn't come for pleasantries. She had come to make sure they saw her success, to plant the seed of recognition, guilt, and fear. The next day, news of the event spread through town. People were buzzing about the powerful young CEO who had bought the Williams estate, the very house where the once wealthy family had lived. Word reached Elaine soon enough, and within days, she confirmed what she already suspected: the house now belonged to Lily. Lily could only imagine the chaos that must have erupted in that tiny apartment when her mother found out. The woman who once looked down on everyone now had to face the fact that her useless daughter had become more successful than all of them combined. But Lily wasn't finished. She wanted more than revenge. She wanted to understand how far they would go now that the tables had turned. A week later, she received an unexpected visitor at her office. Elaine Williams. The woman entered her office dressed impeccably, her perfume heavy, her posture still proud. But her hands trembled as she clutched her purse. She asked for a meeting, claiming she wanted to make peace. Lily sat across from her, saying nothing, listening as Elaine talked about how difficult things had been, and how family should stay together. Every word dripped with hypocrisy. Elaine tried to mask desperation with charm, pretending that the past was a misunderstanding, that they had done what was best. And then, she made her real intention clear. She wanted to move back into the old house, just for a while, until they got back on their feet. For a moment, Lily's mind went completely still. Her mother wanted to return to the same house she had thrown Lily out of, to live under the roof Lily now owned. The audacity was staggering, but Lily didn't respond right away. Instead, she smiled politely, her expression unreadable. She told Elaine she would think about it. Inside, however, a storm was brewing. For years, she had imagined what it would be like to see them suffer. And now, fate had delivered the perfect opportunity. She could let them back in. She could watch them crumble inside the walls that once symbolized their cruelty. She could make them live with the consequences of their arrogance. Not through punishment, but through slow, humiliating irony. That night, as Lily stood before the dark, empty mansion, she made her decision. She would let them back in. But not as family, as tenants. The sun rose over the once grand Williams mansion, its light cutting through the thick veil of dust and decay that clung to the walls. For the first time in years, the house was alive again, not with joy, but with the restless movement of a family trying to reclaim what they'd lost. Richard, Elaine, Adam, and Grace moved back into their old home as if stepping into a ghost story. Every creak of the floorboards, every faded portrait on the wall, seemed to whisper the truth they didn't want to hear. That this house no longer belonged to them. It was now the property of the daughter they had thrown away, but they didn't know that, not yet. Lily had allowed them to return under a standard rental agreement handled through her company's legal team. The contract was cold, impersonal, and clear tenant responsibilities, monthly payments, and strict maintenance rules. There was no trace of her name anywhere. From her office in the city, Lily received weekly reports from her property manager. The family had been struggling to keep up with the rent. Their savings were dwindling, and Richard's health was declining faster than anyone expected. Still, Elaine refused to face reality. She threw small gatherings, trying to impress people with old charm, pretending they still owned the mansion. It was almost painful to watch. Almost. Lily made regular inspection visits, under the guise of a corporate representative. The first time she arrived, the family was stunned. Elaine greeted her awkwardly, trying to mask recognition behind forced politeness. Richard sat quietly in his chair, his eyes hollow. The siblings avoided eye contact. As Lily walked through the halls, her heels echoing against the marble, she couldn't help but notice how empty the rooms felt. The luxury had faded. The art was gone, the furniture sold, the house stripped to its bones. It was poetic justice. The empire they'd once built on pride and money now stood as a hollow monument to their greed. In those moments, Lily realized something unexpected. Revenge wasn't always about grand gestures or fiery confrontations. Sometimes it was about watching in silence as the people who wronged you unraveled by their own hands. Still, part of her couldn't shake the memories. The little girl who had once run barefoot across this very floor, chasing a family's approval that never came. That ache remained, buried deep under her success. Weeks passed, the family struggled more each day. Richard's medical bills piled up. Adam couldn't find stable work. Grace's marriage had ended in scandal, leaving her broken and angry. And Elaine, proud, manipulative Elaine, grew desperate. She began calling Lily's office more often, asking for leniency on the rent, pretending it was just a small delay. Lily approved every extension request, but never personally. Her assistant handled it all. She wanted Elaine to feel the slow burn, the humiliation of begging an unseen power for mercy, unaware it was her own daughter holding the strings. But then something shifted. One afternoon, as Lily reviewed reports, her property manager mentioned that Elaine had started cleaning the house herself. No more staff, no catering, no luxury. Just a woman trying to scrub the dirt off the walls of her past. The image lingered in Lily's mind. The once proud matriarch on her knees, clutching a mop in the mansion she'd once ruled. It should have brought satisfaction. Instead, it brought silence. Days later, Lily received a late-night call from the local hospital. Her father, Richard, had collapsed again. His health was worsening, and the family couldn't afford his treatment. Elaine, frantic and out of options, had reached out to the property company for financial help, not knowing the person she was pleading with was the very child she'd abandoned. Lily's first instinct was to say no, to let fate take its course. But something deep inside her hesitated. She remembered the father who, though distant and cold, had once given her a book for her 10th birthday. The only gift he'd ever given her. A book about building, creating, becoming more than what people said you could be. Maybe he hadn't meant it as love, but to a lonely child, it had been enough to hold on to. The next morning, she approved a discreet payment covering part of Richard's hospital bills. No one knew where it came from. Elaine assumed it was from an old business associate. Lily told herself it wasn't forgiveness, it was control. She wanted them alive long enough to understand what they'd done. But the past wasn't done with her either. One evening, as Lily walked through the renovated parts of the house, she found herself standing before the small room that used to be hers, tucked away in the far corner of the second floor. The door was half broken, the paint chipped. But inside she could still see faint traces of who she'd been: faded wallpaper with childish doodles, a cracked mirror, and the faint outline of where her small bed had been. It hit her harder than she expected. The loneliness, the hunger, the nights she cried herself to sleep, wondering why love came so easily to everyone else but her. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her revenge had begun to lose its sweetness. Still, she stayed the course. She had a plan to end things completely. One that would leave no doubt about who she had become and what they had lost. The Williams family would soon face their final humiliation. The sale of the mansion they thought they'd reclaimed. The property had tripled in value after her company's quiet renovations, and now a luxury buyer was interested. The contract was almost ready. Once it was signed, the family would be evicted for good, this time with no hope of return. But fate, as always, had its own timing. Before Lily could finalize the deal, her assistant came into her office one morning with a grave expression. A letter had arrived, hand-delivered. No sender name, no address. Inside was a single piece of paper. Her mother's handwriting. It read, "I know who you are, and I'm not sorry." Lily's hands trembled as she read the words again. Elaine had finally realized the truth. The game was no longer hidden. The mask had fallen. The rain came down in sheets as Lily's car sped through the winding roads toward the Williams mansion. Her phone screen glowed beside her. The message still there, stark and cold: Z. Come home if you want to see your father alive. For years, she had imagined returning to that house to make them face their sins. But this time, the tone was different. This wasn't about business or pride anymore. This was about the end of something, maybe theirs, maybe hers. When she arrived, the gates were open, the front lights flickering weakly in the storm. The house loomed ahead like a wounded beast, old and resentful. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. The air was thick with tension. The faint smell of medicine mixed with damp wood. She could hear faint coughing from upstairs, her father's room. And then, from the shadows near the staircase, Elaine appeared. Her mother looked nothing like the woman Lily remembered. Her elegance had faded into something hard and desperate. Her once pristine hair was streaked with gray, her eyes sharp with exhaustion, but her posture was the same. Proud, defiant. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There were no words that could bridge the years between them. Only the storm outside filled the silence, its thunder echoing through the hollow halls. Elaine motioned for her to follow. Upstairs, Richard lay in his bed, frail and pale. The man who had once built an empire now struggled to breathe. Tubes and medicine bottles surrounded him, and yet, when his eyes flickered open and found Lily, they widened, not in warmth, but in disbelief. He tried to speak, but his voice broke. Lily stepped closer, unsure if she wanted to comfort him or curse him. She looked at the man who had signed her away like a transaction, who had let her walk out of this house with nothing. And now, he was at the end of his life, powerless and small. Elaine stood behind her, arms crossed, watching. After a long pause, Lily finally turned to her mother. She didn't need to ask how Elaine had discovered the truth. That the company, the landlord, the mysterious benefactor, had all been her. The look in her mother's eyes said it all. Satisfaction, not regret. Elaine had pieced everything together. The property purchase, the charity event, the inspection visits. All the signs had been there. And now that she knew, she seemed almost proud. It took you long enough, her expression seemed to say. For years, Lily had imagined this moment, her mother begging for forgiveness, her father admitting what they'd done, but reality was far colder. There were no apologies, no tears, only bitter pride. Elaine began to talk, her voice sharp and cruel. She spoke of survival, of sacrifice, of how they'd done what they had to. She called Lily's success impressive, but with a tone that stripped it of meaning, as if it had all been inevitable, as if she had merely become what her parents had raised her to be. It was manipulation, the same twisted logic that had ruled this family for decades. Lily stood there, every word slicing through her, every memory flooding back. The rejection, the hunger, the nights of loneliness. Her fists clenched, nails digging into her palms, but instead of breaking, she smiled. Her mother mistook it for surrender. But it wasn't, it was resolve. For the first time, Lily saw her mother not as a monster, but as something smaller. A woman so consumed by pride that she had destroyed everything she claimed to love. The empire, the wealth, the family, all gone because of greed. And now, Lily was the only one standing tall. She looked at her father one last time. His breathing was shallow, his eyes glassy. Whatever words he might have spoken were lost to time. He wasn't the strong man she remembered. He was just a frail shadow of the arrogance that once ruled this house. When she turned to leave, Elaine followed her down the stairs. "Are you happy now?" her mother asked coldly. "You've taken everything from us. Is that what you wanted?" Lily stopped at the doorway, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, quietly, she turned her head, her eyes calm, steady, and colder than the rain outside. She didn't need to answer. The silence said everything. When she left that night, she knew this chapter of her life was coming to an end. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something unfinished lingered in the house, something dark. The next morning, she received a call from the hospital. Richard Williams had passed away in his sleep. The news spread quickly. The town whispered about it for days. Some pitied the once great family's downfall, others said it was karma. But Elaine, she didn't grieve. She didn't cry. Instead, she did something no one expected. She went to the lawyer's office. Within a week, the contents of Richard's final will were revealed. Most of the estate had already been seized or sold, but one thing remained, a sealed safety deposit box, opened only after his death. The lawyer contacted Lily directly. There was something inside for her. The letter arrived 2 days later. Yellowed paper, her father's handwriting still neat despite the tremor of illness. He had known. He had known she was the one behind the purchase, and he had left her something. A confession, maybe. A secret. In his final words, Richard admitted that years ago, when the business began to fail, Elaine had insisted on sending Lily away. Not because of money, but because she wasn't Richard's biological daughter. The words hit like a thunderclap. Lily froze, reading them over and over again, her heart pounding. Elaine had lied to everyone, including Lily's father. Lily had been the product of a secret from Elaine's past, a truth buried under shame and denial. Her father had found out later, and though he hadn't confronted Elaine, the betrayal had hollowed him out. Sending Lily away had been a coward's compromise. to keep the illusion of the perfect family intact. And now, with both truth and revenge laid bare, Lily finally understood the full scope of her mother's cruelty. The night sky was lit in orange and black, the old Williams mansion engulfed in flames. The air reeked of smoke and history burning away. The once proud symbol of wealth and cruelty was now collapsing under its own weight, its roof caving in, its walls cracking open like old wounds. Lily arrived at the scene moments after the fire trucks. The sirens screamed through the storm, red lights flashing against the rain-soaked pavement. Firefighters moved in chaos, shouting orders, dragging hoses through the mud. And amid the confusion, someone screamed her name. Elaine was still inside. The words cut through Lily's mind like a blade. For a second, she froze, unable to move. Every part of her wanted to turn away, to let the fire finish what karma had started. But something deeper pulled her forward. She ran. The firefighters tried to stop her, but Lily broke through the line, her heels sinking into wet grass, her hair clinging to her face from the rain. The mansion loomed before her, the same doorway she'd once been cast out of now glowing with embers. The heat was unbearable, the smoke thick and choking. Inside, she could barely see. The grand staircase was half collapsed, the chandelier shattered, portraits melted off the walls. Every corner she passed held ghosts, echoes of childhood, laughter that had never belonged to her. And then she saw her. Elaine stood at the base of the stairs, coughing, her body trembling. She was clutching something close to her chest, a metal box half melted by the flames. The fire crackled between them, a barrier of heat and hatred. For years, Lily had dreamed of this confrontation, of finally making her mother face everything she had done. But standing there, with fire closing in and the ceiling ready to fall, the rage began to unravel into something else. Elaine looked terrified, not proud, not powerful, just human. Her eyes darted between the flames and Lily, filled with confusion and something that almost resembled regret. The box in her hands fell open, papers scattered, old photos, documents, a birth certificate burned at the edges. Lily caught a glimpse of her own name, her mother's handwriting, and another man's signature. The truth was right there in front of her. Elaine stumbled forward, gasping for air, trying to say something, but her voice was lost in the roar of the fire. Lily stepped closer, shielding her face from the heat, reaching out instinctively. Not out of love, but reflex. And then, with a deafening crack, part of the ceiling gave way. The beam crashed down between them, sparks flying in all directions. The shock threw Lily backward, the impact knocking the breath out of her. For a moment, everything went black. When she opened her eyes, she was outside, surrounded by medics and flashing lights. Someone had dragged her out, one of the firefighters, his voice distant and muffled. She coughed violently, her lungs burning, her mind spinning. Her eyes darted to the mansion. The fire was nearly out, but the roof had collapsed completely. The old house, the one that had once been her prison, was gone. Elaine was nowhere to be seen. Hours passed before the firefighters found what was left. In the wreckage of the study, near the remains of the old staircase, they discovered the metal box. Half melted, but intact. Inside, most of the papers were destroyed, but one photograph had survived. It was of Lily as a child, sitting in the garden, her face lit by sunlight. Behind her stood a man, not Richard Williams, a stranger. The same name from the birth certificate. Lily stared at the photo for a long time, her hands trembling. She didn't recognize the man, but his eyes were the same shape as hers. Her mother had kept this photo hidden all these years, locked away in the mansion's heart. It wasn't guilt that had driven Elaine to return to the house that night. It was fear. She had wanted to destroy the evidence, to erase the truth before anyone else found it. And in doing so, she had burned herself along with the lie she'd built. The next morning, as the rain finally stopped, the sun rose over the ruins. The mansion stood as nothing more than ash and smoke, the final monument to a family that had destroyed itself from the inside out. Lily stood among the wreckage, the photograph still in her hand. She didn't cry. There were no tears left, only silence heavy and absolute. In the distance, the townspeople whispered. Some pitied her. Others called it justice. But Lily didn't care what they thought. She knew that no amount of revenge could rewrite what had been done. The house was gone, but the scars would always remain. That afternoon, she met with her lawyer to close the final documents. Insurance claims, demolition plans, and the legal confirmation of her full ownership of the land. Her father's will had left everything else to debt, but the property was now hers completely. Before leaving, The lawyer handed her a small envelope, something the authorities had found in the box, separate from the papers. Inside was a note, written in her father's handwriting. It read, "If you are reading this, the truth is already out. I didn't protect you when I should have. I let pride guide me instead of love. You are more of my daughter than anyone in this family ever was. I only hope you find peace where I couldn't." Lily's hand shook as she folded the letter back into the envelope. For the first time in her life, she felt something close to closure. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but understanding. The fire had taken everything. The house, the lies, the ghosts, and left behind only the truth. As the wind picked up, she turned to leave, the photograph still tucked in her pocket. The ashes of the mansion swirled behind her like a storm fading into calm. She didn't look back. But as she reached her car, something caught her eye. A single figure standing across the street. A woman in a long coat, face hidden by the hood, watching silently. For a moment, Lily's heart froze. It couldn't be. But when she blinked, the figure was gone. The video footage looped endlessly on Lily's laptop screen. A flickering image of a woman moving through the charred remains of the Williams mansion. The timestamp was hours after the fire had been declared extinguished. The firefighters were gone, the police had sealed the area, and yet there she was. The figure looked exactly like Elaine. Her coat, her gait, even the way she turned her head toward the camera. Deliberate, almost taunting. It was impossible. Elaine had been declared dead. Her remains, though burned beyond recognition, had been identified by dental records. But the woman in the footage was unmistakably alive. For the first time in years, Lily felt fear again. Not the fear of a child, but the dread of someone who realizes that the past refuses to die. Even when you burn it to ashes. She sent the video to the police, but they dismissed it as a coincidence or an error in the timestamp. A trick of light, they said. Someone passing through. But Lily knew better. She knew that look. It was the same look her mother gave her before every betrayal, calm, knowing, patient. In the weeks that followed, strange things began happening. The land where the mansion once stood became a target for developers. Lily refused every offer, wanting nothing more built on that cursed soil. But every night, she received anonymous letters, urging her to sell. No signatures, no return addresses, just neat handwriting and the same line each time. Let go, or you'll lose everything again. The letters grew darker, the handwriting angrier. One morning, she found one slipped under her apartment door. It wasn't just a note this time. It was the photograph. The same one of her as a child, the one she had kept hidden in her drawer. Someone had taken it. And on the back, written in red ink, "Has watching too." Lily's mind spiraled. Who was that? The man from the photograph? Her real father. Was this connected to the secret her mother had tried to burn? Every lead she followed only led to more shadows. Until one afternoon, while combing through the ashes of the property again, she found something the investigators had missed, a half-buried ring. Gold engraved with initials EW and JM. Her heart stopped. JM, the same initials from the birth certificate, her biological father. The ring wasn't destroyed by the fire. It had been deliberately placed. Someone wanted her to find it. That night, she drove 3 hours to the address listed on her birth record, an old farmhouse near the outskirts of another town. It was late, the air heavy with mist. The place looked abandoned, but the lights flickered faintly inside. She hesitated before stepping out of the car. Every instinct told her to leave, to let the past stay buried, but something stronger pulled her forward. Inside, the smell of old wood and dust filled the air. The furniture was covered with sheets, the wallpaper peeling. And then she saw it. A wall of photographs, yellowed with age. Pictures of her as a baby, of Elaine holding her, of a man she had never met but recognized instantly. He had her eyes. Footsteps echoed behind her. Slow, deliberate, creaking on the wooden floorboards. Lily turned, her breath catching in her throat. A shadow moved into the light. It wasn't Elaine. It was a man. Older, his face weathered but familiar in a way that made her knees weak. Her father. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes told her everything. He had been watching her all along. From a distance, hidden in the margins of the life she thought she'd lost. He'd been the one sending the letters, the one warning her not to sell the land. And the truth hit her like a storm. The house fire hadn't been an accident. It had been planned. Elaine had survived, and he had known. They had both been part of something far darker than greed or pride. The mansion hadn't just been a home, It had been the hiding place of years of corruption, forged documents, and secrets that tied their family to a chain of deceit spanning decades. Her mother's survival wasn't a miracle. It was an escape. Her father turned away, walking toward the door. His voice, when he finally spoke, was soft-tired. He told her not to follow, that she was finally free, that everything he and Elaine had done had been to keep her out of what was coming next. But Lily couldn't accept that. She drove home with a storm raging inside her. Her mother alive, her father complicit, the truth half buried, half revealed. And she, the child they had both abandoned, now the only one left with the power to decide what to do with it. Days passed, then weeks. The police reopened the investigation after Lily submitted the footage and the ring as evidence. The case became a national scandal. Whispers of inheritance fraud, staged deaths, and a fortune hidden through shell companies tied back to Elaine's name. But Elaine herself was never found. Until one morning, months later, Lily received a package. No sender listed. Inside was a single key and a note. "You finally won, my daughter, but remember, winning always costs something." Attached to the key was a small address tag. It belonged to a private bank in another city. Inside the vault, Lily found not money or jewels, but a single sealed envelope marked Final Will, Elaine Williams. The letter inside was handwritten, elegant, and cruel in its calmness. Elaine confessed everything. The lies, the affair, the staged fire, the decades of manipulation that had built and destroyed their family. She admitted she'd planned to disappear, to let Lily inherit everything, not as a gift, but as a curse, knowing that the weight of the truth would destroy her faster than poverty ever could. And yet, at the end of the letter, there was something unexpected. Elaine wrote that she had loved her in her own broken way, that every betrayal had been an attempt to protect her from the same cycle she herself had fallen into. The last line read, "You were never the daughter I threw away. You were the daughter I could never deserve." Lily sat there for hours, reading the letter again and again. When she finally left the bank, the sun was setting, golden, quiet, almost peaceful. She drove back to the empty land where the mansion had once stood. The grass had started to grow again, soft and green over the ashes. For the first time, she didn't see a graveyard of pain. She saw a beginning. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of rain and smoke. She closed her eyes, whispering to the silence, not forgiveness, but farewell. And as she walked away for the last time, the camera from across the road, the same one that had once caught her mother's ghostly figure, blinked red again, recording silently. Through the lens, a faint shape appeared at the edge of the property. A woman standing still, watching her go. Whether it was memory, guilt, or something else, Lily never looked back to find out.